Cool. So let's get started. Today's session is about how to test SAP Cloud Integration, or CPI. And I guess towards the session I would be probably mostly using CPI, but it is, when I say that, that's for the cloud integration, the part of the integration suite. Just to get that cleared. So we have a number of items that we want to be covering today, and that is why do you want to do testing, the standard ways of testing, and how you can automate your testing. Then we would look at a little on testing PI to CPI migrations, and then what my thoughts on how to use testing in everyday life, and then how you can actually get started getting some better practices for delivering your integrations. So yes, that's then why do we test? And so this is, I guess, just my most recent event where I found out that testing was not really, or I should have been testing better. So I was working on a client, and we had two source systems that were feeding data into a system. We needed to look up some data in the SAP backend based on the port of loading, port of discharge, and we could fetch that from the payload, and that was pretty simple. What we forgot in that process was that this port of loading only came from one of the systems and not for the other systems. That meant for all the other systems, they would just fail, and that was a bit inconvenient. That meant we had to roll back the change, and we needed to figure out how, or it was pretty simple to figure out how to fix it. But then we needed to roll back a lot of these documents that we have created that had failed, and then being able to resend them. And it was a bit of a hassle. I think the two of us, the business consultant and me, spent like 20 hours on resolving this over a couple of days. And that meant the client had some outstanding invoices that were not getting paid because we needed to wait with these things. What the impact of, I am not really sure, but it was, well, we managed it. It wasn't that expensive. But this is the thing that you want to avoid, and especially and I guess this is so avoid having problems in the current code. Understand that have all of these different cases that developers don't recognize that they need to have in, and then it's a lot easier to resolve bugs before you move data into your productive system. I think that is one of the main takeaways from that, and you don't need to do as much testing in that process. So there's two types of test cases that you would need to be doing. There's the kind of assertions and unit test where you are, with a specific input, would expect some output. And obviously this is something that relates a lot to your Java applications, where you can set up the system, put in some data, send it, and then you'd get a response back that says, here is what is going on. Then the other one is a record replay scenario where you want to produce the same number of documents. So you will take some documents from your productive, both in and output messages, and then you will send them to the outgoing document of this. So these are the two different ways that you can do testing. And some of the things we can catch, as we talked about before, it is these things that you have unexpected structures that you don't know how to behave. And I think maybe PR is a little simpler. If you go to a CPI, where you suddenly would have different flows depending on some payloads and some context that you need to understand, then it also becomes a lot more difficult to test. So we are developing an application, as you'll see a little later, and we do have a tester that her main objective is to find bugs in the code that the developers have created. So the developers have delivered a good job of creating integrations, and then they would then, or that can do some specific thing, then she will take it and then try to find all the edge cases that they did not think about, like sending data with 0 lines or in a message mapping scenarios. How would that behave? What would you actually be able to do in those cases? And that means that hopefully, I guess that's the main idea, that we can deliver code to our clients with fewer bugs in. And for us, it's also a lot easier if we find the bugs in our lab where we have control and can recreate the cases a lot easier than trying to recreate it and support it while we're supporting a client. So that's just a little on how we're testing as a software company. But I think it's a little different when you're testing integrations code, because the scope you have in a normal integration scenario is a little less. You don't need to be able to do the same scenarios. If you have questions, comments along the way, do put into the chat. So what are the standard ways of testing? So obviously, if we look at Groovy or XSLT code, you can set up some different scripts that allow you to actually run these. And it is pretty easy to set it up. One challenge is that you need to be able to send in a payload, run it, and compare it, and see everything is working as expected. So there are some frameworks you can use to set up testing and being able to continuously run these things. I do not recommend that you just set up testing without having really a framework for it, because the framework would handle a lot of these scaffolding and being able to test and run it in a specific way. So it's definitely possible to run these test cases separately. It does require you have a good governance in place and make sure that the scripts is the same in your repository as they are in your iFlows, and have a mapping of these things. The other one is the simulation, and I guess you've all been trying this, where you will go into the CPI system. Let's just try that. If I have my iFlow. So I have an iFlow here. Let's see if I remembered everything. So here the idea is we have our get customer iFlow here, and I think it is here. I have an option here I can set in here. I can upload a file payload, and this you can actually use the zip file that you can download from your repository. And then you can take this and you can run it to some place, and you can just press run here. And this is the same as we had in the PI scenario, where you could take payloads in your message mapping, upload them and see how they run in all the operation mapping, and hopefully they produced a good result that you could then use for this. So now we can see here the simulation is completed. We got a number of messages here. It's not really as relevant, but the idea is that you can then go here and check that the result is as expected and it passes through the correct steps. I would say this is one of the more challenging things to do, because there's some limitations on it. For instance, you could only have like 10 steps in this model, and if you have an output document that's a little bigger, it is difficult to actually see what the data will look like. So that's the simulation. You also have that on message mapping, that you can trigger and upload messages and see how they perform. Let's see here. The other approach is to use a Postman collection, where you would be creating an API that would allow you to send data to this iFlow, and then you would check the response data coming back, and you would be able to see, what are the data that we're getting here, and how does this all affect? And yes, it requires that you have an HTTP endpoint in your processing. It requires that you would get the payload back, and you can set up reasonable assumptions in this response payload that you're getting. So it requires a lot of effort, and it requires that you also set time to evaluate and make sure that this works. Then the problem often comes, what about if you have other protocols than, for instance, file or something like that? How would you actually start testing that? And then it becomes a little time consuming to actually have a good way to create and maintain these things, because creating a test case is one thing, being able to maintain it in an easy way is another thing that you need as a part of your delivery process. Questions on these standard ways of testing? Otherwise, I will go to the more fun part, where we will talk about how you can actually automate your testing, and I guess that's actually why you are here. So let's see. So we have created a tool that allows you to connect to your CPI system, download all the artifacts from the system, and then being able to actually create test cases based on these runnings of what is going on. So let me show you how easy it is to actually run a test case of the scenario we have before. So here we have the Figaf tool. It's a standalone Java application. You can run it in Cloud Foundry and then connect it to your CPI systems, whether it's a Neo or Cloud Foundry. It works on all of these systems. What I'll then do is I will go to the integration objects, and here I will find the object that I have created. And I guess I got one here that is called, no, faster, get customer to here. Great. What I can then do is I can start record messages, and we will create it to a suite that's called webinar for our month year. We can then also put in how many messages we want. For this, we only want one. You can specify a number of messages, and we would also put in a message expression. So here you can either put in an XPath if you know that there is data that you want to extract from this. Then you can actually put it in here, and that will create two different test cases for it. We also have some more controls that we can download MPL attachment and put them as a part of our test case. We can select if we want only finishing and run steps, and there's a lot of tests objects we can do. So what I'll do is I'll press save, and now I can start this recording, and then the system will handle everything itself. It will start the iFlow into trace mode, and then the only thing is that you would need someone to start processing this message, and I'm just doing this on the other screen. And now I have processed this on the other screen, and I can then start pull messages. Then this will go into the iFlow, look at all the different trace data we have, and download them as attachments. So if we just go to this iFlow, we can see it was this iFlow, we just triggered it, and we can see it is run in trace mode. And then the Figaf tool will get all these different types of contents that you have as a part of this the processing. So here it will fetch all of these payloads, download them and persist them, and then you can use that as a test case. And yeah, depending on size, it can take a little while for that to be generated. So now we've created a recording, we've downloaded all the messages that were needed for this, and all we then need to do is we can just say create test cases for these things. We can specify which other systems this exists on, and now we have actually created a test case. So that was all I needed to do to create a test case. And yeah, I don't know what it took me, 4 minutes, 2 minutes to create this test case, and I had not prepared it in advance. Okay, that's one thing. Now we want to run this test case. And the way we can do that is we can just press run and select which system we want to run it on. We want to select it here. And this, what it will do is it will take this iFlow, switch it into trace mode, and send messages through it. And if we look back here in our message processing log, we can now see that this has been executed with a correlation ID, and this means that this is the Figaf tool that is actually running this. We can look at the results here, and we have a status here of the message has been sent. If there's problems with it, you can go in here and you can actually see if there were any problems sending messages in here. Good. Now we can see that everything was compared successfully, and that is because I have gone in here and created a lot of in our test configuration. We have set up a number of items that we want to ignore for this property. So we know that it is only for specific cases that we want to have this running scenario. Good. So that was actually all you needed to run. If there were any problems, you could go in here and you can actually see where there was a difference in this this execution, and if you wanted to ignore certain elements, you just clicked on it and then that part would actually be skipped. That means we would no longer see a difference in that specific field as an exception. So that is how easy it is actually to run these test cases. Okay, so let me just go in here, and now I will go in as a developer. I will make a modification to this iFlow. Do it up here. I will set a new header property, webinar 22. It's a new value. We'll save it as a version, and we will start to deploy it. And in the meantime, I will just go back to the Figaf tool, and one of the things I want to do is I want to fetch this new version so we know what is going on, and we get that from the package. So we can obviously synchronize everything, or we can synchronize just a single iFlow. And this will download it. It will ensure we have copies of this version here. And we can see it's now have a new version here. We can compare the version if we want to see what was actually different here. So there's a number of ways you can go through and use this as a part of your delivery process to understand where something has been changed, and we can see a new element has been added here. Good. Let's go back to our test suite. So we have our test suite here, and if we now run this on the same system, we would expect to get some errors because there was a new header attribute that was changed as a part of this. We have our testing result here, and we can view the results. And yeah, sometimes it takes a little while for it to process and ensure everything is run successfully. And compared, etc. So now we have one that is received, and we can see we now get a number of errors with some difference, and it says here that there was a new property that was only in the actual and not in the expected payload. So we can just say ignore, and now we have this created as a new message. So one of the things that is also important in this process is that you make sure that these test cases is always valid. So actually, it's not really a good idea to go in and ignore these properties. You actually need to, instead of ignore it here, you would go back here to this, and then you will go and you would say, hey, I know this test execution has been processed successfully, and now this is what I'm actually looking for. So no more needing to figure out where in the code I needed to make changes. You get all of this as a part of this collection, and you can use it in that format. Good. So that's testing and that's running. We can know the difference. We can take the results. We can even get a report on this. We can download a report here of how the testing was processed. So here we can see all the different payloads and messages that we have, the statuses, contact, what we were using in our details, and the details about where there was any differences in this document. Good. So yeah, then you run it again, and then everything would be successful for the specific test case. But that means that it is really easy to maintain the test cases, and if you do not have test cases that you can maintain, it really does not matter, because they will just disappear or be outdated, and you would not know, does this test actually work? Okay, now I will show you something differently. So let's say that we have created this this test case and it works fine. We're satisfied with it. What if we want to make a different comparison and run it in a different way? We also have that as an option. We can go here. We can say here, extract the data as a new test suite. We can add it to our test suite, and I think it's present with the test suite. This would allow us to actually take a copy of this payload we have here. So this is called the projection. I can actually then go into this. I can take any of my payloads. Contact name. Oh, I need to go into edit and say Daniel here. So it is really easy to create these exceptions or changes that you want in a specific message based on your input document. So now we have created a change. We can run this on our system, and we would then expect, once this is run, that we will get there is an error in this this element. So that is one way of handling special cases. Another way is we can create a shared configuration. And shared configuration is a way for us to create a specific set of ignoring result for a specific test case. And we can do this by creating a shared result here. This is test case. We can select which test cases this should affect, and we will take this new one we created. And here we can then set up the different expressions that we want to have as a part of this. And one thing I want to test with this is I want to test with mock data. Mock data is if you have, for instance, and I think I got a slide for this. Let's just add it here. So mock data is if you have like a create employee endpoint, and you know each time you run it, you will get, so first time you run it, you will get, hey, employee created successfully. Second time you run it, you will get, hey, employee already exists. And then you need to find some different ways that you can override this value and make sure that you can always create employees on this. And this will then add a lot of complexity to the solution to make sure that you can always create the employee. What this will do is, if you have switched this on, the Figaf system would act as a mock service. So let's see this in action. And so what we'll go is, we'll go to this one here. We can see here we have added our test case that we just created. We have set it up as mock service. And that means if we go back to our test suite, and let's just select this one we already have here, where we have the special run permission on. We can say run on this given system, and what then will do is it will create a copy of this iFlow, and we'll be able to see it in a specific way. Let's just take the last result here we had. So this was when we made a small mistake in one of the documents, and we can easily see here the diffs here that it was Daniel and now it is Mario Pontus, because there was no change in it. So this is if you want to make, so that was if you wanted to make specific modifications to it, and then obviously you can go in and update the test case to expect that payload. So now we can go back here. We can see here it says it was executed on Figaf mock service. This is a new iFlow that the tool has made, and this is then updated each time that it senses there's actually a change in the original iFlow. And if we compare it here, we can see here it's calling an OData service where it's using the data. In this call here, we will then use the Figaf system as a mock endpoint. And here we have an on-premise installation of the Figaf tool. If you have Cloud Connector, it will just send the data directly to that endpoint without you having to do anything with it. Let's see here, we have our monitor. And we can see now this iFlow has been triggered. We are getting the same kind of payloads, etc. So if we go back to our tool, we should hopefully see it. It will come up with a number of divs, because I don't think we have added all of these ignore exception into this specific comparison result. So this would obviously give us a little extra work to handle these things, and there will be some expressions that you need to add because the OData service does not provide them, or they're changed, stuff like that. So there is going to be some changes you would need to ignore in this case, but each time you would run it, you would be able to actually see what is going on and how these things works. So that was unit. Next is unit test. Okay, so that's the default way we can simplify the testing efforts. And as you saw, no code was actually needed to write any of these test cases, and we could run it automatically in a number of different ways. So are there any questions on these things, on how we can simplify the testing, what is going on? Otherwise, we'll go to the next one, which is unit tests. And I think unit test is also one of the important parts. In unit test, you have the option to actually run this Groovy script. And something is easy to have in test the full flow, but there's definitely cases where you want to run specific payloads and see how they perform. The way we have integrated this is obviously we have all the versions of the iFlow, and that means we can easily create and mock everything that the user needs. That means that I, as a user, do not really need to do a lot of things with it. So we have a Git repository, and let me just show you how to create these test cases. So here we have our test cases. Here we have the messages of this test cases. We can press here, generate Groovy script, add to a Git repository, or we can download it. And what it will then do is it will go in and upload create all the things that is actually needed for you to run a successful Groovy script. And it will then come with the different payloads that you have as a part of this. And what this really makes it a lot easier, so you can obviously run this. And then what is the tool is providing is creating the payloads, property payloads, and then the body, sending them into the iFlow, and then you can actually see there's actually some differences here that it was expecting and it did not get. So we know that there is something we would need to look into. And the best way to do that is to go into the script, set header. Here we can go into the debug mode. So we'll just need to set it as at breakpoint, and we can then run in debug mode. And being in debug mode would then allows us to run the test and see what it looks like at any given point in time. So here we can go in with the debug editor and deal with all of these things. And the best thing is that I can even set this up. It does not require a lot of Java or Groovy knowledge to be able to run and set this up efficiently. And that was the whole goal about this, that to create a solution that users would actually use and would not have any challenges setting up. So okay, so yes, I have my son at work today, so that's always a fun thing. Good. So unit test, we covered that. Testing PI to CPI migration, I covered that. You wanna also cover this in a little bit, and the idea is that you can actually create recordings in the same way in a PI scenario, and then you can actually map them to a CPI based scenario. And the way we do that is we simply just go here to the integration object, we go to the PI system, and here we will select a partner called Multicenter. And what we can do is we can take this iFlow, we can record messages. We'll just add it to the same one. Press start. And this works from a user perspective the same way. It will go into the iFlow, it will start recording of these messages. And yeah, it takes a few minutes, but I already have created one just before here, and the idea is that here we obviously have the same messages. We have an input and an output message. What I then need to do is just press migrate to CPI iFlow. I'll add it to our test suite, and then I need to add it to the iFlow I have migrated on the right system. So here I have created the iFlow, and because this was migrated with the Figaf tool, it knows which endpoints to add into it. You could also use your own mapping if you have migrated normal without using the Figaf tool for the mapping. And then it's just to press save, press OK. And now we have actually created a iFlow, a test case for this specific iFlow. And we can just go to the agent test cases. We can select it and we can say run on this iFlow that we have. And this is a file to file system, and that means that we would also need here to do some changes. And that means that if we open the result here, we will create a new version of it, this iFlow. And here, instead of the original file one, it will just use a HTTP call to simplify the processing. We get some errors here, and here you can also easily see how easy it is to actually set up ignoring 4 specific parameters that are not valid. So we say OK, and we can process a full comparison with these new settings. What are our data here? And now everything's green. We have completed migrating and run the test for this. Good. Yes, so we do have a lot more on migration and automating the migration. We have a webinar coming up on the 24th, and you should get a pop-up where you can go sign up for that one. It is on 2 times. And the idea here is to show you how the Figaf tool will actually enable you to automate your migration process. So you would be able to, skip a lot of the boring part, create iFlows directly, and then with the tool you can then convert message mappings with function libraries, RFCs, and RFC lookups. So there's a lot of features that the tool provides that is not a part of the standard setup that you get if you import mappings. Oh yeah, and you should, in the other corner, you should have a pop-up box that says you can actually sign up for this webinar. I do hope that you will go there, and we will talk more about migration and how we can automate that. Because that is anyway going to be a hot topic in the coming years. One of the things that I often struggle with when I deal with testing is the thing, if testing should be a normal way of the way for you to deliver integration. It's not just something you should be doing once in a while when you feel good about it, but something that actually happens from time to time. And it should be easy to create test cases. It should be easy to modify them, so you know that they're always current. And obviously, ideally, it should run every night, or it should run whenever you do a transport. And this is a lot easier with the Figaf DevOps tool, where you get that as a part of the delivery process, where you can say, okay, I'm going to transport these iFlows, and then it will say you need to test with these test cases, and then you can make sure that they're current and you have tested the integration successfully. But you need to have it as a part of your practice. And now I guess it's time for you to take action. I hope you really enjoyed seeing some of these different features, what is possible for automating your test cases, how you can actually easily create all of the different test cases that needs to take place. If we talk migration, PI is supported until 27, with extended support until 2030. But I would assume that a number of clients would be using the tool after 2030, given Business Connector is still around. So you have time before you start the migration. But I guess there's definitely places where it makes sense to start the migration already. Okay, so I hope you saw that this is something that is useful in your practice. I guess the biggest part is obviously you as a developer to convince management about the tool. Getting a tool will simplify the way you're delivering integration. And obviously, I hope you saw it as a good tool for this. And then obviously there's some KPIs that it will help improve. It will enable you to deliver integration faster. it would enable you to resolve a faster resolution of errors and fewer errors on the first deployment, given you have the testing capabilities in place. I think also you want to get a tool like this because of yourself, because I guess you are here because you are considering what options we have to make it easier for you to deliver integration. You want to spend more time on fun and not the governance and testing. I think that is also something that drives a lot of us, because we know we need to do the testing, but we don't have a way to do it properly, and that means it just becomes not done. And you want to deliver good quality integrations. So there's a number of stages in the process. So obviously you need to understand how this tool can make it easier for you to deliver integration. This is about the speed of integration. It's a cheaper integration. Being able to run tests all the time makes it a lot easier for you to actually ensuring it works, because it's just a press of a button and then you have a test result and you can see how it behaves. And then there's the better governance process about having something like that as a part of your process. Then you need to convince management, and maybe that's the hard part, that this is something you want to look into, and that would help your company achieve better integration. Then you should try the tool and see how it can help you with the integration, show the team, and then convince management and get a deal to get the tool started. So we could obviously try to look at some of these business cases for testing, and how does that all make sense. And as we saw before, I had a case where I was not testing my integration. That meant that we had a number of errors. How often that occurs, I think I do it maybe once a year. I have something like that going on, and obviously depending on scenarios, customers, complexity of the integrations. And then there's a number of different costs involved in this. There's the cost about finding the error to actually have the monitoring capability to see there's actually something that failed here. There's the labor cost. How much does it cost you to fix this? And both you as a developer, the business, etc. And then there's the loss of reputation or loss of orders, etc. And if you get into this, how much does it cost for your production to be offline for an hour? And I think most companies, most SAP companies, this is in the range of €1 million or something like that. And then, yeah, it makes sense to do some testing and ensuring that you're not affecting productive systems in that way. And obviously this can be really hard to estimate what the cost is and how it affects you. The other thing is how do you actually make a business case for running tests? Because I don't think that if you do not have a tool in place, it is really not possible to do any testing, because it should be performed as the developers want to test, or whenever you get to this as a developer, you just say, I will test it my way, and as long as he remembers how to test it, and it will take 1 to 4 hours to test maybe, and this requires a lot of thought of the developer on how to do it. So you can obviously have a process in place that says we will spend 4 hours on testing, but probably if you do not have a formal procedure in place, no one would be testing 4 hours, because they don't know what to be testing for this. And that's why the tool simplifies that processing. I really recommend that you would do a proof of concept or trial of the tool. It is really simple to get started and get through here. It can run on your laptop or in BTP Cloud Foundry. If you run on your laptop, you would not be able to, or you would need to set up Cloud Connector to be able to test this mocking service, and that is why the Cloud Foundry deployment has some advantages. But yeah, go to figaf.com/devops, and there should also be a pop-up for that. You can sign up for that. So I wanted to entice you to get started doing this, and that means you can actually get 2 months of free testing usage with the tool. And the way you can do that is just to go through the trial, create 2 test cases, run them, and then send me these examples or these reports. So we can see everything has worked out and you have done a good job with running these things. And the thing is, set it up in Cloud Foundry. Go to figaf.com/devops. There's also a pop-up box that you can go in and sign up for. Use that link to sign up, and then install Figaf on your BTP connected to a CPI system. Create test cases or create a recording, run it, see how it works. And if you create 2, you get 2 months of free testing for it, and then just write support or me, and we will extend the license for 2 more months. You can also, if you have some specific questions, because obviously we did not cover all of your specific cases, if you have things you would like us to cover, then book a session with me. You can go to figaf.com/book, find a spot in my calendar, and then we can get started. Not book, not by a meeting, I guess, was the pop-up box here. So that was actually all I wanted to share with you. Time for Q&A. If you have any questions, do put them into the chat or the Q&A session. Then I will cover these and try to see if we can cover these specific cases that you may have in this process. Thanks, Michael.